Good morning and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. It's our biweekly conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents. My name is John Erlingheuser, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach at AARP Connecticut. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers, Pat Lang. Thanks for being with us today, Pat. And so why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what you do for AARP, what your background is, and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, I've been an AARP volunteer now for over 10 years. I've participated in their advocacy, their caregiving, and their livable communities initiatives, among others. I'm also a district coordinator and instructor with AARP's driver safety program. I've been retired very happily for the past 17 years. Before that, I worked in pharmaceutical sales and as a provider relations rep for a Connecticut managed care organization. And I've also done managed care contracting for a nationwide pacemaker testing service.
Awesome. Well, you really stand out as a typical AARP volunteer. They're involved in everything. I mean, it's amazing. Our volunteers do so much great work, and we couldn't do the things we do without volunteers like you, Pat. We're lucky today to also have your state senator with us today, and that's Matt Lesser of the 9th District. Matt's the co-chair of the legislature's Insurance and Real Estate Committee, and he's the vice chair of the Human Services Committee. So Senator Lesser, why don't we start off with maybe you telling us a little bit about your background, maybe outside of the legislature. Tell us about what towns you represent and anything about your background if it's important for our viewers to know about you.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. And Pat, it is great to see you again. I am serving in the state senate in the 9th District, which is Middletown, Cromwell, Rocky Hill, Newington, and a piece of Wethersfield. I've served for 2 terms, and I was just reelected to a 3rd term in the state senate. And before that, I served in the State House of Representatives. And so I've worked with AARP on a zillion issues over the year, from energy prices and trying to tackle energy reform to now do a lot of work on healthcare. And so the last 2 terms I served as chair of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee. I think at the moment we're still looking to see what we're going to be doing this coming year, but I've been really focused on the issue of healthcare, and partly it's because I'm a cancer survivor, and it's an issue that's important to me. And it's very easy to think about other things when you don't have a major health issue to confront. But making sure that everyone in the state can afford healthcare, can afford access to healthcare, can afford the prescription drugs is really, really important to me. That's why it's so important to protect Medicare and Medicaid and all of our affordability programs and make sure that we're bringing down the cost of healthcare. I live in Middletown with my wife, Sarah, who's an attorney, and our son. And it's really a great privilege to serve in the legislature.
Awesome. Pat, why don't you take our next question for Senator?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Senator, can you tell us about your role as co-chair of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee? What does your role entail, and what legislative proposals does that committee have jurisdiction over?
Well, we try to tackle a lot of the big issues, and it's a lot of things can go through an insurance and real estate lens. So everything from making sure that we're tackling climate change. The insurance industry is on the front line of our changing climate, and making sure that they're looking at that and they're taking that into account. Sea level rise and all sorts of other things, to a lot on prescription drugs. One of the big questions we're looking at is, since Congress recently passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which for the first time, long overdue, gives Medicare the ability to negotiate down the price of prescription drugs. What can we do to build on that, to make sure that we're making drugs affordable for all residents in Connecticut who need them? But we capped the price of insulin at $25. That's the lowest cap in the country. 1 in 4 Connecticut residents who depend on insulin was taking less than they need because they couldn't afford it. And so working together, some of this is on the federal level, some of it's on the state level. We're working to cap that so that everybody who needs insulin can afford it. And then just lots of other issues around health insurance, making sure that it's affordable. So obviously, if you're on Medicare, great. But for people who are a little bit younger, I know some of your members are quite at Medicare age, making sure that private insurance is affordable is a really important and worthy goal. And then there are other insurance issues, making sure that homeowners and car insurance is affordable. And one issue that I hear about all the time, and I'm sure you get this, is long-term care insurance, which is up at an astronomical rate. There are a lot of reasons for that, and our ability to solve that is limited, but it is a big issue. We've been working to sort of chip away at that problem and see if we can provide much needed rate relief to the policyholders out there.
Yeah, that's those are some big issues. It's a very, very important committee, and we've worked closely with you on a lot of those initiatives. And that kind of brings me to my next question. You talked about prescription drugs. You talked about what AARP worked very hard on with a lot of your allies in the Congress to pass the ability to negotiate. But in the country, there are a handful of states that have created what's called Prescription Drug Affordability Board, and they set an upper limit on what insurers can pay for prescription drugs. So, as co-chair of the insurance committee, do you think that approach could work in Connecticut, or are there other ways we could adopt payment limits that other states have set, to try to rein in the cost of prescriptions here in Connecticut?
Yes, absolutely. And I will just say, we've got some great pharmaceutical innovation out there. People are inventing new drugs, and it's wonderful. But it is ridiculous that in this country, we get the same drugs that everyone else in the world gets, but we pay the highest price. And there is no justification for that. I talk to people all the time who are paying thousands of dollars a month on needed prescription drugs. And, our neighbors in Canada are paying a tenth of that. And it's not, the Canadians get access to the same drugs we do, but we are paying to subsidize them. And it is outrageous, and it must end. So yeah, states are trying different things. Some are trying to import drugs from Canada, and we should try to do that. I don't know that it'll work, but we should try. But others are really focusing on trying to bring down the prices by creating a drug affordability board. And I absolutely would support that. And also pegging, looking to piggyback onto new Medicare prices and see if we can use that price to bring about real savings. And then there are other programs that help get some people affordable prescription drugs. There's something called the 340B program, which helps community health centers and some hospitals. And we can do more with that to try to bring about real savings to customers. But, I'm all for innovation and research and development. But for a drug like insulin that's been on the market for 100 years, it was never patented. It was given away by the guy who invented it to the world. And the idea that here, 100 years after it was invented, some company that didn't do any meaningful R&D, they just have a right to make it, and they use that, and they use their regulatory power to just raise the prices over and over and over again, so they can, buy their CEO a new yacht. That is, to me, unjustifiable, and we got to do something about it as a state.
Right,
I would just say, states are doing some really innovative things. California, for example, is interested in setting up its own state-run prescription drug manufacturer to go into competition with these guys. And, that's a pretty extreme example, but I mean, it shows you just how broken the market is, that somebody can go in, they can rely on the fact that it's really hard to get FDA approval to make a prescription drug and clear out the competition and then charge whatever the heck they want to charge.
Right. I mean, and there's probably no silver bullet, but all of the things you've mentioned are good strategies to kind of chip away at things, and it puts pressure. Even when you talk about the importation, that's something we support. And do we think that's a panacea? No, but it's a pressure that can be put on the industry to try to get them to do the right thing and bring down prices. So that's some great work, and we always know you're out there on the front lines trying to get some innovative approaches. Appreciate that. Pat, why don't you take it from here?
Okay, thanks. And what other committees do you serve on, Senator Lesser? That I know you served on, you've mentioned the Insurance and Real Estate and the Human Services Committee. Are there any other committees that you serve on?
Yeah. This is the last 2 years. So every 2 years it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just say the Human Services Committee has oversight over the state's Medicaid program, which, in addition to helping poor people of working age and children in the state, is also the main way we pay for nursing home care in Connecticut. So I'm the vice chair of that. I've also served on the Appropriations Committee, which oversees the state budget. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm on the Labor and Public Employees Committees. I'm on the Energy and Technology Committee. I think that may be it at the moment. I've also served as vice chair of Public Health recently. So I've been on a lot of the committees in the legislature. I run around a lot, and I just try to keep my head above water. But the nice thing is I can certainly work on issues that are important to my constituents on any of those committees, but because we work well with colleagues, even if there's an issue that's on a committee that I don't serve on, I could certainly pick up the phone and call the chair of that committee and say, hey, I've got a constituent in Newington or Middletown who has this issue. Would you please address it? And sometimes they'll tell me no, and sometimes they'll tell me yes, but it gives us an opportunity to work on just about anything that the state touches.
That's great. And, as I say, you do cover a lot of ground there, Senator. But you did mention the Energy and Technology Committee, and you mentioned in your opening, that you did, and you have over the years when you were in the House and in the Senate. I think your whole career, you've been on the Energy and Technology Committee, if I'm not mistaken. You've done a lot of work with AARP, and I know the General Assembly has done a lot to try to contain electric rates. A lot of that is out of their control, but I know that the generation supply portion of electric bills are going to skyrocket January 1. So what do you think can be done, both by the ratepayers, to kind of contain their costs, and by the legislature and regulators to try to, do something on their end? So what do you think, are some approaches people could do to try to tackle this, both from a government policy perspective and from a behavior perspective?
Yeah, thank you, John. It's one of the most serious issues we face as a state, right? Because when electric rates go up, certainly that affects anybody who's living on a fixed income. Any seniors who are watching this, understand that. But it also affects every business in the state. And when I talk to our biggest manufacturers, the issue they say, it's not property taxes, it's not any kind of taxes. The biggest issue that really influences whether or not we can stay in Connecticut is electric rates. And if you keep those down, we'll stay. And if not, we have to look at alternatives. So it's a really big issue. At the moment, there are a number of things influencing our electric prices, but the single biggest one is the wholesale price of natural gas. And gas prices have gone up in part due to the war in Ukraine. There are a bunch of different issues. There's some pipeline capacity issues, but our dependence on natural gas is the biggest single factor, and certainly it's raising electric rates all over the country. And I think saw a doubling of their gas prices, of their electric rates, and that's fortunately it's not quite that bad here, but it's really bad, and it's really affecting a lot of folks. Look, John, we've talked about some things we can do. One of them is just simply expanding state service, giving more negotiating power to bring down electric rates. And one of the ways we can do that, look, 20 years ago during deregulation, state legislators thought it would be a good idea to let everybody negotiate their own rates by using these competitive third-party suppliers. I just don't think that's been successful. I think it's caused more confusion. It's locked people into unaffordable rates over the years. And so I think that was a noble experiment. I don't think it's worked. And I think we need to go back to having really strong, large standard service offerings so we can at least get some real buying power. But
and that's something they're looking to do in Massachusetts. And, Governor-elect Healy championed doing away with the market as Attorney General. So now the ball is in her court as governor. So, I think, Connecticut should take a serious look at that as well. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you made a really excellent point. So Matt, Senator Lesser, that is, we have the General Assembly going into session the first week of January. You're on currently a bunch of committees. You may be on some different ones come January. But what, Pat's your constituent. You're talking to, the residents of the 9th District and all over the state. What are Senator Lesser's priorities for 2023?
Well, I'm still sorting that out, but I think the top of my list will be, regardless of where I'm, sitting and what shakes out, will be prescription drug reform. I think we've got to tackle that. It has been an issue I've heard about for years, but now, thanks to the action in Washington and some of our sister states, I think is really a time for action. So tackling the price of prescription drugs is a good way to put more money back in people's pockets, will help every resident of the state. And I think this is the year to do it. So I'm really excited about that. There's a lot of other things I'll be working on. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but I think that would make a huge difference. And if we can go to folks and say, look, we cut the price of drugs by 75%, that leaves people with more room to pay for heating oil or electricity or any other costs that have gone up. inflation has hit people's pocketbooks hard, and it's time that we provided some real relief to the residents out there.
And the cost of prescription drugs, has been so inflationary before we hit this inflation. I mean, they've risen so much more than the average cost of living items. And so, it's really something that will be beneficial to folks. We're glad you're championing that as a priority. It's been a top priority for AARP and will continue to be. I know you work very closely with my colleague on this issue, Anna Dorgazi, who is the key point person on it. And we appreciate your work on that. So, Pat, why don't you close us out, and then we'll give Senator Lester an opportunity to make any other final remarks he has.
Sure, thanks. Many AARP volunteers, myself included, have testified before the General Assembly in the past. Can you tell us some of the ways that the public can stay informed about the work of the General Assembly and some of the ways they can participate in the process? Even if they don't feel comfortable testifying. And this is both during the session when the legislature is in session, and even when they're not in session. How can we participate?
I love that question, Pat. And first of all, you have been just an outstanding advocate. You show up at everything, and you're a wonderful, friendly face, but you also are tough, and you know the issues, and you've done the homework, and that's really great. Look, we have a citizen legislature, and I hope is a pretty open process where anybody can come up to the state capitol to meet us in person. For a while we were mostly meeting remotely. A lot is now back in person. Not everything. Public hearings are still remote, but we would certainly encourage, whether it's virtually or in person, to meet with your legislators, but also to testify in front of a public hearing on an issue. If there's an issue that's coming up, testimony is really important. Hearing stories from people around the state is really important. Oftentimes, legislators don't know a whole lot about an issue. Even after it's been drafted into legislation, we'll be having a public hearing, and that may be the first time folks have an opportunity to really learn about an issue in any detail. And so it's really important, if it's important to you, that you tell us about it. But also just reach out. We're all generalists. We may have a specialty. We may have something that we care an awful lot about, but we are asked to vote on all sorts of issues that we may not have any kind of background in. So if there's an issue that I get 3 emails about, I represent 100,000 people, but I don't get that many emails, to be honest, from constituents. So if there's something that you are concerned about, you send me an email or you call me, and I got 3 of them from my constituents. That really rises to the top of my to-do list. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, what's going on over here? It's important that you reach out. Don't take for granted, even if we're a different party from you. We work with you, and so it's important that we hear from you. We're not good mind readers, and I think that's really important. And now that we have virtual hearings, it's more convenient than ever. If you have action to testify, you can get your hair done or go to the grocery store and stay on hold, and then when you're off, you can go and testify. And you get 3 minutes, and every resident of the state gets 3 minutes to say to make their case. But then there's a question and answer process, and if legislators, there's no time limit on that. So please reach out. And then, of course, a lot of us will also have coffees and town hall forums and whatnot. And if you see one for your legislators, certainly show up to those. Those are a really good way to connect with your legislator. And I would really encourage any member of the public to do it.
Great. I appreciate that, Senator. And, so that kind of is bringing us to a close. First, I want to thank Pat, our great volunteer, and she's just representative of all of the hundreds of volunteers we have in Connecticut that help do the work that informs our policymakers of what's important to people 50 and older in particular, but all residents of Connecticut. So, Pat, thank you very much for joining us. And Senator, I want to thank you as well. Do you have any closing thoughts or words you want to impart with our folks?
I think my only closing remarks, John, would be to say thank you to AARP. And, it's not just about getting a discount. AARP is a really wonderful resource. And as a legislator for years, I've turned to your colleagues and sometimes even to you, John, for advice about important issues about public policy. You guys are real straight shooters fighting for older Americans and really for sound public policy. We talked about electric rates today. lots of people are trying to make money off of utility bills, not AARP. AARP is looking out for people who pay the bills, and there need to be more people doing that. That's what you guys are doing. You're looking out for people with prescription drug costs, and it's really invaluable. There's no other organization quite like AARP, and we're really grateful for the work.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words, Senator Lesser, and appreciate you with our folks this morning. So that's Senator Matt Lesser, 9th District. And that brings us to the close of another edition of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. And I believe this will be the last one of 2022. So we thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2023.